The first time a married man offered to pay for my future, he did it over lunch with a folded linen napkin on his lap and a wedding ring flashing every time he lifted his glass. By the time he finally said the real word for what he wanted, I already knew my life was about to split into a before and an after. What made it worse was that a part of me did not stand up and walk away. My name is Lily, and when this happened, I was 21, living with my parents outside Columbus, trying to become a dentist, and watching that dream slip out of my hands because I could not come up with the money to stay in school. At the time, that was the only part that felt unbearable. I did not know yet that desperation can make ugly things sound reasonable if they arrive dressed as help. A few weeks before that lunch, I had been sitting in a financial aid office listening to a woman explain that there had been a problem renewing my student funding. She talked about missing approvals, delayed processing, deadlines, appeal windows. I remember the fluorescent lights buzzing over my head and the cheap pen cap digging into my thumb while I kept asking if there was anything else I could do. There was not. At least not for someone like me. I came home with my backpack feeling twice as heavy as it should have. My mother was at the kitchen sink, and she knew the second she saw my face. I just shook my head once. My father was in the den with the TV on low, and when she told him, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes without saying anything. That silence hurt more than if he had yelled. I was the first person in my family to get that far. My parents had spent years telling people I was in dental school with a kind of careful pride, like saying it too loudly might jinx it. So when I had to freeze my enrollment, it did not feel like paperwork. It felt like I had failed in public. I had a boyfriend then, too. His name was Ben. He was not rich, not powerful, not part of some grand rescue. He was just a decent guy my age trying to stay afloat himself. He drove an old Ford that rattled at stoplights, worked long shifts, and kept apologizing because he could not fix this one thing neither of us knew how to fix. I told him not to apologize. I meant it. Still, I cried in the shower that night where nobody could hear me. After I froze school, my life got smaller fast. During the week, I picked up whatever odd jobs I could. On weekends, I worked at a busy pizza place not far from our neighborhood. The restaurant was always loud in the same familiar way. Plates clinking, sports on the TVs, kids asking for extra ranch, the smell of garlic butter staying in your hair after a double shift. I wore black non-slip shoes, tied my apron too tight, and smiled because smiling got better tips. Most of the staff were kind to me once they found out what had happened with school. Not fake kind, real kind. The kind where people bring you a soda without asking because they know you have been running for hours. One of the co-owners was a man named Alfred. Before everything turned rotten, he seemed like the kind of older man everybody liked. Mid-60s maybe. Neat gray hair, expensive watch, crisp shirts even when everyone else dressed casual. He knew regulars by name, tipped the kitchen staff around the holidays, and never raised his voice at me. If you had asked me then whether I felt unsafe around him, I would have said no without thinking. That is part of why what came next got under my skin so deeply. Nothing about him looked like a warning until the day it did. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was folding laundry on my bed. I thought maybe it was about an extra shift or some scheduling issue. Instead, he said, warm as ever, "Lily, I wanted to talk to you about something. Could we meet?" I asked if it was about work. He paused, then said, "In a way." He did not want to talk at the restaurant. He said it would be easier somewhere quiet. And because he had always seemed respectful, and because I was naive in ways I did not understand yet, I agreed. He picked me up near a drugstore at the edge of our neighborhood the next day and drove me to a small Italian place across town. White tablecloths, soft music, waiters who clearly knew he had money. The whole drive there, I kept trying to guess what this could be. Maybe he knew someone at the college. Maybe there was a better job opening. Maybe he was going to offer me some office work that paid more than waiting tables. I let myself hope because when you are drowning, even ridiculous hope starts to feel practical. Lunch dragged in a strange way. We talked about ordinary things first. The restaurant, my classes, exactly what had happened with my funding. He listened seriously, and for a while I almost relaxed. Then he stopped touching his food and looked at me a little too long. "You know, Lily," he said, "I've been thinking about your situation." I set my fork down. "Okay." He smiled, but it was not his usual smile. It looked tighter somehow. "I've been thinking maybe there's a way you wouldn't have to leave school after all." For a second, my body reacted before my mind did. Just relief, bright and immediate. I leaned forward and asked what he meant. He did not answer directly. Instead, he said he hoped I would not be offended by what he was about to say. He said he did not want me to think badly of him. He said adults sometimes came to arrangements that helped both sides. By then, a cold feeling had already started moving through me. He kept circling it, and I kept wishing he would either say it or stop. Then he looked at me in a way that made the whole room feel smaller and said, "Has anybody ever told you what a beautiful young woman you are?" That was the moment lunch stopped being lunch. I thanked him automatically, then asked what that had to do with anything. He reached for his water glass and said he was willing to pay for my tuition. Not lend me money, pay for it. He said he could also help with other things. Clothes, expenses, whatever I needed so I could focus on school and stop worrying. I stared at him. Then I asked the only question that mattered. In exchange for what? He gave a short laugh that sounded embarrassed on purpose. He said I was smart enough to know what he meant. When I did not say anything, he lowered his voice and asked if I had ever heard terms like sugar baby or sugar daddy. I had. Of course I had. Still, hearing him say it while his wedding ring caught the light turned my stomach. I felt hot all over and then cold. Something in me wanted to stand up so fast my chair would hit the floor. Instead, I sat there and made him keep talking. Maybe that already says something bad about me. Maybe I wanted to hear him shame himself clearly enough that I could throw it back at him. He took my silence as permission. He said he had noticed me from the day I started at the restaurant. Said a man his age still had fantasies. Said he believed I could benefit from his generosity, and he could enjoy my company from time to time. He said it like he was proposing a business deal, and not asking me to let him buy access to my body. I asked him to say it plainly. He did not fully. Men like that hide behind softness. But he said enough. I snapped. I asked what kind of girl he thought I was. I told him he should be ashamed of himself. I reminded him he had a wife and children. I said I was not for sale. For the first time since I had known him, he lost some of that polished ease. He raised his hands and told me to calm down. Said I had misunderstood the spirit of what he was offering. That made me even angrier. I told him to take me home. The drive back could not have been more than 20 minutes, but it felt endless. He did not apologize. Not really. He just shifted into persuasion. He said I did not have to decide anything right then. He said I should think about my future. He said lots of girls did arrangements like this and lived very well. He said he was not asking for much. A little time, a little sweetness, a little discretion. When he dropped me off, I opened the door before the car had fully settled. He leaned across the console and said one last thing. "Think carefully, Lily. I could make your life much easier." I slammed the door harder than I meant to. If the story ended there, it would be simpler. I would be the girl who got propositioned by a rich older man and refused. I wish that was the version I had to live with. But that was only the first half of the truth. At home, I was furious for maybe 2 hours. Real fury, the kind that makes you pace your room and mutter under your breath. I pictured his face while he said those things. I pictured his wife somewhere in some nice house while he sat in restaurants trying to buy girls young enough to be his daughter. Then night came. The house got quiet. And the practical part of my brain, the ruined part, the desperate part, started whispering. He can pay. That was the ugly sentence underneath everything. I hated myself for even thinking it, but once it got in, it stayed. I thought about school, about the clinic, about the white coat I had been picturing since I was little. I thought about my classmates moving forward while I carried pizzas and refilled drinks for families who barely looked at my face. I thought about becoming a dentist, making enough money to help my parents, not spending the rest of my life running from one bill to the next. Then I thought about the other side, about Ben, about my own body, about whether doing something for a reason changed what it was. For nearly 2 weeks, I did not answer Alfred. I went to work and avoided him. He did not push. That almost made it worse. He would nod at me from across the restaurant like nothing had happened. Once he told the kitchen to make me food before my shift ended because I looked exhausted. He acted so normally that I started feeling crazy, like maybe I had overreacted, like maybe I was the one making it filthy by seeing it clearly. That is how people talk themselves into harm, not all at once, in layers. Ben noticed something was off. We were sitting in his car one night outside my parents' house, the windows fogged a little from our breath, and he asked directly what was going on. I said, I was just stressed. He asked if the school mess was getting worse. I said yes. He squeezed my hand and told me we would figure it out somehow. He said it with so much sincerity it almost broke me. I almost told him then. I got as far as, "There's something weird that happened." But the second I imagined the look on his face, I shut down. Part of it was shame. Part of it was fear he would go storming into the restaurant. Part of it, if I am being honest, was that by then I had already started entertaining the possibility, and saying it out loud would have made it real. So I lied. A few days later, Alfred texted me. Just one message. "If you still want to talk, I'm here." I stared at that sentence so long the screen dimmed. When I finally answered, I did not say yes. I said maybe. We met in the parking lot behind a bank on a gray Thursday afternoon. I made him explain what he expected. I did not let him keep it vague. We would be discreet. He would help me financially. I would spend time with him when he asked, within reason. There would be intimacy. There it was, sitting between us. I asked how often. He said we would work around my school schedule. He made it sound almost considerate, which somehow made it worse. Then I asked whether there were other girls. He smiled without answering for a second, then said, that was not something I needed to worry about. I should have gotten out of the car. Instead, I heard myself say, I'm not promising anything yet, but I might be willing to try. The way his face changed at that sentence still makes me sick. He looked pleased in a deep, settled way, like a man closing on something he had already decided was his. He said, I'll take good care of you." That same day, he sent me money. A lot. More money than I had ever seen hit my account at once. Enough to handle what I owed and more. I sat in my car outside campus staring at the bank app on my phone, feeling my pulse in my throat. Then I went in and took care of the balance that had been hanging over me like a threat. I signed forms, talked to staff, smiled in places where smiling felt impossible. The whole time I felt split in two. I told my parents the funding issue had been sorted out after all. I said there had been an update. They were so relieved they did not inspect the lie very hard. My mother cried in the kitchen and hugged me with wet hands. My father smiled in that contained way of his and said, "See? Sometimes these things work out." Ben lifted me off the ground in the driveway when I told him. He kissed me and said he knew I would get back in. I let him hold me while the hole inside of me went cold. That first week after I accepted, Alfred barely asked anything physical of me. He was careful, strategic. He bought me things, sent money for books and supplies, paid for little things I had stopped letting myself want. Better shoes, a new coat, a salon appointment I would never have booked on my own. He told me to think of it as support, like he was easing me into a role I had not fully agreed to admit I occupied. Then he started asking for time. Lunches first, afternoon drives, a hotel room once because, in his words, privacy made everything easier. I do not need to hand over every physical detail because that is not the center of what destroyed me. It was the transaction itself. The way he would send money and then touch my face like there was something tender about it. The way he liked me dressed in things he had chosen. The way he called me his girl in a low voice that made my skin crawl. I kept telling myself I was enduring something temporary in exchange for something permanent. Education, stability, a future. That was the story I used to keep functioning. There was one line I would not cross. After a few weeks, he hinted that it would be easier for me to rent a small place of my own, somewhere private, somewhere I did not have to explain every hour. He even offered to lease an apartment for me. God help me, I considered it. For 2 days, I imagined telling my parents some made-up story about a roommate near campus. Then I stopped. Not because I was brave. Because I knew that if I moved into a place tied to him, I would be stepping through a door I might not come back from. I could lie about money. I could lie about gifts. I could lie about being busy. I could not build a whole second life without becoming somebody else entirely. So I told him no apartment. Not yet. He accepted it, but not happily. He said I was making things harder than they had to be. He said secrecy only worked when both people committed to it fully. That was the first time I saw irritation under his smoothness. Around that time, my mother started looking at me more carefully. She noticed I had quit the pizza place. She noticed I had nicer clothes, better makeup, a phone upgrade I should not have been able to afford. One evening, she stood in my doorway while I was putting away laundry and asked, "Lily, you're not doing anything you shouldn't be doing, are you?" My whole body went rigid. I tried to laugh it off, asked what she meant. She said she did not know exactly, just that things had changed fast, and she was worried. Then she lowered her voice and said, "Don't do something that would break your father's heart. You know his health." That landed hard because my father really did have heart problems. Not the dramatic kind people collapse from in movies, but enough that stress scared my mother. Hearing her say that made me feel like the walls of my room had moved inward. I told her everything was fine. She looked at me for a long second that made me think she could hear the lie breathing between us. After that, I tried to be more careful. I wore older clothes around the house. I stopped bringing shopping bags inside. I told Alfred he needed to slow down with gifts because people were noticing. He smiled and asked if the attention was making me nervous. I said yes. He touched my wrist and said, "Then trust me more." I did not. The summer turned into a blur of classes, lies, and compartmentalizing. I would spend the morning in lab with my hair tied back, trying to focus on tooth models and measurements. And later that same day, I might be sitting in Alfred's car while he talked about his investments, his grown children, and the inconvenience of people who lack discretion. He never talked about love. Not once. In a strange way that made it easier to lie to myself. He was buying comfort and youth. I was selling access and silence. But control is a feeling people rent from denial. The real cracks started small. A missed call from him followed by 3 more. A text asking where I was when I did not answer quickly enough. A sudden annoyance if I said I could not see him because of exams or because Ben had plans with me. Once he asked, almost casually, whether I was still with that young man. I said yes. He gave me a look I could not fully read and said, "That seems complicated." It was not a question. It was pressure. Ben, meanwhile, kept trying to be a good boyfriend to a girl he did not understand anymore. He took me for burgers after late classes, rubbed the back of my neck when I studied too long, told me he was proud of me for getting back into school. Every kind thing he did made me feel smaller. Not because he was weak, because he was decent, and I was lying to him every day. I thought about confessing to him more than once. Not to my parents, to Ben. Breaking up with him at least, telling him I was not the girl he thought. Ending one lie if I could not end them all. But every time I pictured the questions that would follow, I shut down again. So I stayed. By the 4th month, hiding everything had started showing up on my face. My mother stopped asking casual questions and started watching me in silence. Ben became easier to irritate because I was distracted all the time. One night, he asked why I flinched when my phone buzzed. I told him he was imagining things. He said maybe, but he did not sound convinced. Then there was the apartment again. Alfred brought it up more seriously this time. He had a place in mind, he said. Small but nice, furnished, convenient for school. He said it would solve many of our problems. I knew he meant his problems too. No more sneaking around my parents' schedule. No more excuses. I said no again. This time he did not hide his annoyance well. He told me I could not expect him to help me at this level, while refusing simple steps that would make the arrangement smoother. I asked whether it was an arrangement or ownership. The second that left my mouth, the air changed. He stared at me, then smiled in a thin way and said I was getting dramatic. That should have been the moment I ended it. But by then I was trapped in the oldest trap there is. Dependency. Not total, but enough. He was paying for school. He had made himself part of the structure holding my future up. To cut him off meant risking the whole thing collapsing again. 2 weeks after that, everything came apart. It was a Sunday afternoon. Ben had picked me up after I spent most of the day pretending to study at the library because I needed distance from my own house and my own mind. As we turned onto my street, I saw a black luxury SUV parked in front of my parents' house. It did not belong to anyone on our block. I felt something drop inside me. Ben noticed it too and made some dumb joke about us having rich visitors. I did not answer. My hands had already gone cold. There are moments when your body knows before your brain lets itself know. That was one of them. We got out of the car. I could hear voices through the screen door before I even stepped onto the porch. Ben glanced at me because all the color had left my face. I opened the door. My mother was on one couch, stiff as a board, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles looked white. Across from her sat two women. One was maybe late 50s, dressed beautifully, in a way that announced money without needing to mention it. Pearl earrings, cream blouse, straight spine. The other was younger, maybe in her 30s, hard-eyed and furious. The second I walked in, both women turned toward me with the kind of focus that makes a room go quiet even when nobody has stopped breathing. My mother stood up so fast the cushion shifted. "Lily," she said, and her voice was not normal. "This woman is here because she says you've been doing something very serious." I could not breathe right. The older woman did not wait for me to answer. She looked me over once, slowly, and said, "So you're the girl." Ben had come in behind me by then. I felt him at my shoulder, still confused, still not understanding what house he had just walked into. My mother started speaking again, but the woman cut across her in a voice sharp enough to draw blood. "You have been seeing my husband." There are sentences that do not sound real even when they are happening 3 feet from your face. That was one of them. My first instinct was not to deny it. It was to run. I wanted to turn around, leave my shoes in the hallway, and disappear. But Ben was there. My mother was there. And the older woman already knew too much for escape to matter. The younger woman stood up. Daughter, I realized dimly. Not sister. She looked like him around the eyes. She said, "We know everything. The money, the school, the gifts. Don't insult us by pretending otherwise." My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not exactly a gasp, more like pain finding a voice. Ben turned to me then. I will never forget his face. And that was the moment I understood I was about to lose everything at once. Ben turned to me like he was still giving me one last chance to make the room make sense. He did not look angry first. He looked confused. Hurt came a second later, and somehow that was worse. I opened my mouth, but nothing useful came out. Just a broken little sound. The older woman stepped closer and said she had not come to listen to lies. Her name, she said, was Margaret. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The quieter she spoke, the more terrified I felt. Her daughter stood next to her with her arms folded and eyes full of disgust. She looked me over the way people look at something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. My mother kept asking what they were talking about, what money, what gifts, and every question made the room tighter. My father was not home yet, which for a few stupid seconds I thought might somehow save me. It did not. Margaret said Alfred had been paying for my tuition, helping with my expenses, and planning to move me into an apartment. She said it clearly, like a list she had already repeated enough times to stop feeling humiliated by it. She did not call me names right away. That came later. At first, she just laid the facts out on my parents' coffee table like evidence. My mother looked at me and asked if it was true. I should have denied it. I should have fought for a few more minutes of air. Instead, I froze and started contradicting myself before I even picked a lie. I said it was not like that. Then I said she was twisting things. Then I said Alfred had only helped me with school because he felt sorry for my situation. The second I heard those words, I knew how pathetic they sounded. Margaret gave one dry laugh. Pity does not usually involve hotel receipts. She pulled an envelope from her purse and dropped it on the table. That was the thumbnail moment of my life, if you want the truth. A cream-colored envelope hitting a cheap wood table in my parents' living room, while my boyfriend stood 2 feet away and my mother stared at it like it might explode. Margaret had copies of messages, pictures, payment records. I do not know how much she had found herself and how much someone else had handed to her, but it was enough, more than enough. My mother did not even reach for the papers at first. She just looked at me, and her face changed in this slow, terrible way. Not rage, not even disbelief anymore. It was hurt, mixed with embarrassment, like she had been stripped in public without warning. Ben finally spoke. He asked me if any of it was true. I said his name. That was all. He asked again, this time louder. Did you sleep with him for money? The daughter muttered something under her breath about shameless girls. Margaret did not stop her. I wish I could tell you I found some dignity in that moment. I did not. I started crying before I answered, which made me look guilty because I was guilty. I said it was not supposed to become this. I said I had needed help. I said I was trying to stay in school. All of it was true, and none of it was enough. Ben stared at me a second longer, then looked away like my face had become physically hard to look at. He said one curse I had never heard him use in front of my mother, and the sound of it snapped something in her. She started crying too and asking what I had done, over and over. Margaret stepped toward me then. She was still controlled, but now I could hear the rage under it. She told me I was going to stay away from her husband. Not gradually, not after one last conversation. Immediately, she said if I contacted him again, or tried to squeeze more money out of him, she would ruin me in ways I could not imagine. My mother told her not to threaten me in our house, but the words came out weak. The authority in the room belonged to Margaret, because she had arrived with the truth, and I had not. Her daughter was less polished. She asked me if I enjoyed taking money from old men. She asked how many others there had been. She asked whether I got a thrill from wrecking families. I tried to tell her that I had not chased him, that he had approached me, that I had not wanted any of this to explode like this. She cut me off and said, "Women like me always had excuses. Women like me." That phrase stayed with me because I had spent months telling myself I was not one of those women, whatever that meant. I was a student. I was desperate. I was temporary. I was making a sacrifice for a larger goal. But in that living room, under those faces, all my private distinctions vanished. I was exactly what it looked like. A girl taking money from a married man. A liar. A cheat. Cheap in a way that no amount of tuition money could dress up. Then the front door opened. My father walked in carrying a grocery bag and stopped dead when he saw the room. Nobody had warned him. He took in my mother's face, the strangers, Ben standing rigid by the hallway, me crying, the envelope on the table. He asked what happened. Nobody answered fast enough. Margaret did. There are ways to tell a man his daughter has been sleeping with someone else's husband in exchange for money, and she chose the most efficient one possible. She did not spare him. By the time she finished, my father looked like somebody had hit him behind the knees. I thought my mother would rush to soften it for him. She did not. She sat down hard and covered her mouth with one hand. Ben stepped back toward the door like he could not stand inside my family's shame another second. My father looked at me and asked, "Is this true?" I do not know why that question sounded different coming from him. Maybe because he almost never raised his voice and almost never asked direct questions unless he was prepared to hear the answer. Maybe because of his heart. Maybe because I was still stupid enough to want one person in that room to think I was worth saving. I said I was sorry. That was answer enough. He put the grocery bag on the floor very carefully, like he suddenly did not trust his hands. Then he said something I still hear sometimes when I wake up at night. He said, "You sold yourself?" Not loud, not theatrical, just shattered. I started saying no, not like that. But even as I said it, I knew how insulting that sounded. Not like that. As if there were some better version of it that would spare him. Margaret, maybe satisfied she had broken enough, told her daughter they were leaving. At the door, she turned back and gave me one last warning. "Stay away from my husband. If you need money that badly, find another way." My daughter looked at me and said she hoped school had been worth it. Then they were gone. The door shut, and the silence afterward was worse than the shouting. Ben did not leave immediately. That almost made it crueler. He stood in the middle of the room with both hands on his hips, staring at the floor, then at me, then away again. I tried to go to him. He actually stepped back. "Do not," he said. I stopped. He asked me how long. I said almost 4 months. He laughed once, but it sounded like choking. 4 months, he repeated, and then asked how many times I had looked him in the face and lied during those 4 months. I did not answer, because there was no answer that would not make it uglier. He asked if every nice thing he had done for me, every ride, every burger after class, every night outside my house, had happened while I was doing that with Alfred. I said yes so quietly I barely heard myself. He nodded a few times, like he was forcing the information into some place inside him that did not want it. Then he said I had made him feel stupid in front of everybody. He said that was almost worse than the cheating itself. Not because it actually was worse, but because humiliation has a way of shouting over everything else in the moment. My father told him he had every right to be angry. My mother started crying harder. I stood there wishing somebody would hit me because a slap would have been easier to organize than all that pain. Ben said he had defended me to people before. Said he had bragged about me going back to school. Said he had thought we were building something. Then he looked at me with this exhausted disgust and said he did not know who I was anymore. I tried to say I had not meant to hurt him. He said, "You didn't mean to. You just did it anyway." There was no answer to that either. Then he left. I heard his car start outside and pull away too fast. I remember that sound because it was the sound of the last clean thing in my life leaving. After he was gone, I had to stand there and face my parents. My mother asked whether I had slept with Alfred in exchange for all of it. Tuition, clothes, money, the apartment idea. I said yes. She cried openly then, the kind of crying that bends a person forward. My father did not cry. He looked older, just suddenly, visibly older. He asked whether Alfred had forced me. I said no. He asked whether he had threatened me. I said no again. Then he asked why. That question took me apart in a different way, because I did not have a clean answer. Need, ambition, weakness, vanity, desperation, fear, greed, delusion. It was all mixed together. I started saying I had wanted to finish school, that I had thought it was temporary, that I had felt trapped when the funding fell through. My father cut in and asked if I would have come to him before doing this, if I had known he would say no. I said yes. He nodded once and said, "Then you already knew it was wrong." My mother said she had raised me better than this. I do not know if those words are fair to say to somebody in a crisis, But at that moment, fairness had left the house. She was hurt and humiliated, and thinking of all the neighbors, all the relatives, all the people who might find out. I do not blame her for part of that reaction, even though it made me feel like I was shrinking by the second. I went to my room because I could not stand being seen anymore. I locked the door and sat on the floor with my back against the bed. I sent Alfred one message, then another, then 3 more. I told him his wife had come to my house. I told him everything had blown up. I asked what I was supposed to do. He did not answer. That silence told me more than any speech could have. Around 9 that night, my father knocked once and told me to unlock the door. His voice was calm, which scared me more than if he had been screaming. I opened it. He sat in my desk chair and asked to see the financial records, whatever I had. He wanted to know what Alfred had paid, what obligations I had, whether there was anything signed, anything that could become legal trouble. That was my father. Even with his heart pounding and his pride ripped open, his first instinct was still to ask what practical damage remained. I showed him what I could. Transfers, messages, school payments. He kept his face as still as possible while he looked. When he finished, he handed me my phone and said I was not to contact Alfred again that night. Not begging, not accusing, not anything. He said men like that protected themselves first and would let me drown if it kept them dry. At the time, I thought he was just being bitter. He was right. The next day, I found out how right. Alfred finally called around noon while I was sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot because I could not bear to be home, and I definitely could not bear to go to campus. His voice sounded lower than usual, stripped of all the warmth he used when he wanted something from me. He said things had become complicated at home. He said Margaret had found enough to make continuing impossible. He said for everyone's sake, it was best if we ended all communication. That was how he said it. Ended all communication. Like a lawyer drafting a cleanup memo. I asked if that was it after everything. He said I knew from the beginning what this was and what it was not. I asked if he at least understood what had happened to me because of this. He paused, then said he was sorry things had become messy. Messy. I almost laughed. My life had detonated in my parents' living room, and he called it messy. I asked about the semester. He said he had already done more than enough and would not be continuing any support. Then he said something that finally stripped the whole arrangement of its last fake softness. He said it would be smart for me not to make this more difficult than it needed to be. There it was. Not a direct threat. Just enough of one. I told him to go to hell and hung up. Then I sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. I think that was the first time I really let myself see him clearly. Not as a charming older man. Not as my lifeline. Just a wealthy coward who had rented a part of my life and now wanted a clean exit fee-free. He had never promised love, and I knew that. He had never even pretended. But somewhere along the way, I had still built a fantasy that my usefulness to him created some kind of protection. It did not. It created the opposite. Once he pulled away, everything started collapsing in sequence. I stopped answering Ben because there was nothing left to say that was not for my own comfort. He sent one long message the day after the blow-up. He said he kept replaying everything and realizing how many times he had stood next to me, not knowing another man was paying for my life. He said he did not hate me, which somehow hurt worse than hate. Then he said he could not speak to me again. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. My mother became brittle. Not cruel all day, every day, but changed. Distrustful in a way I had earned. Sometimes she would walk into a room and stop talking. Sometimes she would ask where I had been in a tone that made it clear she was no longer asking from ordinary parental curiosity. My father spoke less than usual and checked on me in quiet, practical ways that made me want to disappear. Did I eat? Was I still going to class? Had Alfred tried to contact me again? I did go back to campus once. I parked, sat there, and watched other students crossing the quad with backpacks and coffee cups. Normal life kept moving with such indifference it felt obscene. I tried to go to lab. I lasted 40 minutes. Every time someone laughed across the room, I felt sure it was about me, even though nobody there knew. Shame makes the whole world sound informed. The tuition issue came next. Without Alfred's money behind me and with my finances already hanging by a thread, it did not take long for the numbers to stop making sense again. I tried to look for emergency options, appeals, payment plans, anything. But there is a point where math becomes insultingly simple. I could not carry it. I had to freeze my enrollment again. Walking out of that office the second time felt different from the first. The first time I felt unlucky and heartbroken. The second time, I felt stripped. Like I had sold pieces of myself and still wound up back at the same locked door. That is one kind of consequence people do not talk about enough. Sometimes the thing you compromise yourself for does not even stay bought. When I told my parents I had to freeze school again, my mother sat down at the kitchen table and said nothing for almost a full minute. Then she asked, was any of it worth it? She was not asking to be cruel. She genuinely wanted to know whether there was some arithmetic in my head that still made the damage make sense. There was not. I said no. That one word did not fix anything, but it was the first fully honest thing I had said in a while. For a few weeks after that, I moved through life like somebody walking around inside wet clothes, heavy all the time. I stopped putting effort into my appearance because now every nice thing I owned felt contaminated. Sweaters he had bought, shoes he had pointed at, makeup he had paid for. I started stuffing half my closet into trash bags just to get it out of my sight. My mother saw me doing that and asked what I was throwing away. I told her I did not want his money hanging in my room anymore. For the first time since everything happened, her face softened a little. Not enough to feel like comfort. Just enough to feel like she could still recognize me somewhere under the mess. I got work again wherever I could. Cafes, catering, temporary reception shifts, anything. My body was tired in a clean way that almost helped, because exhaustion leaves less room for mental spiraling. But nights were still brutal. At night, the whole sequence would replay. The lunch, the first transfer, the lies to Ben, Margaret dropping the envelope on the table, my father asking if I had sold myself, Alfred calling it messy. That sentence about selling myself kept coming back because I fought it for a while. I told myself that was too harsh, too moralistic, too simple. Then I stopped fighting it. Sometimes the harsh word is the accurate one. Alfred had dressed it in a more sophisticated label, but the core transaction was plain. He wanted access. I wanted what the access would buy me. I agreed. That is the truth. Painful truth is still truth. I'm not saying that to excuse him. He was older, richer, married, and predatory, in a way polished men often are. He recognized vulnerability and converted it into opportunity. But I also do not say it to pretend I had no agency. I did. Bad options are still options. Desperation explains things. It does not cleanse them. About 2 months after everything ended, I made the worst thought of the entire period. I was on a bus heading home from a catering shift, looking at women in expensive coats through a rainy window, and I caught myself thinking, maybe I could find another man like him. Just someone temporary, just enough to get back into school. The thought came so cleanly it scared me. That was the closest I came to losing myself for good. What stopped me was not virtue arriving like lightning. It was fear, real fear. I saw suddenly how quickly a person could normalize almost anything if enough money was attached. First school, then rent, then a nicer phone, then a different neighborhood, then a whole secret life. I saw how easy it would become to stop hearing my own disgust after a while. That frightened me more than poverty had. So I made myself choose something harder and smaller and slower. I started over, not in some beautiful cinematic way, nothing noble. I just started doing the next decent thing in front of me, working, saving, avoiding lies when I could, accepting that some losses were not coming back. Ben did not come back. He had every reason not to. I never reached out again after his message. There are people you love badly enough that the most respectful thing you can do after hurting them is leave them alone. My relationship with my parents took longer. Trust is stubborn after public humiliation. But time has its own strange craftsmanship. My mother started talking to me normally again in pieces. First practical things, then little jokes. Then one afternoon she asked whether I wanted tea and said it in the same tone she had used before any of this happened. I nearly cried over that stupid cup of tea. My father and I rebuilt differently. Less talking, more doing. I helped with errands, went with him to appointments when he let me, paid little household bills when I could. One evening he sat with me on the porch after dinner and said he knew shame could make people do stupid things to keep from feeling small. He said he had spent his whole life trying not to feel small. Then he told me something I had never known. When he was 19, he had almost dropped out of a machinist program because he could not afford books, and a married woman he worked for had offered to help him if he helped her back. He said he had run from that situation so fast he never picked up his last paycheck. I asked why he had never told me. He said because fathers are idiots and like their daughters to believe they were always made of clean decisions. That conversation did not erase what I had done, but it changed something in me. It turned my father from a judge back into a person. About a year later, I was still not back in dental school. I took prerequisite work where I could, stretched every dollar, and considered changing paths entirely more than once. There were days I thought I had ruined the version of my life that mattered most. Maybe I had. Some damage does not reverse neatly, but damage is not always destiny either. The biggest shift happened inside me before it happened anywhere else. I stopped telling myself stories that made me sound more innocent than I had been. I stopped telling myself stories that made me sound more evil than I had been too. I tried to stand in the uglier, more useful middle. I was desperate. I was ambitious. I was flattered. I was weak. I was manipulated. I was consenting. I was ashamed, long before I was exposed. All of that was true at once. That is the version I can live with, because it is the version that teaches something. I never saw Margaret again. I never saw her daughter again either. But sometimes I think about that day and realize that for all the humiliation they caused, they also forced an ending I probably would not have created on my own. I hate that part of the truth, but it belongs there. As for Alfred, I heard once through somebody from the restaurant that he sold his share of the pizza place not long after everything blew up. I do not know whether his marriage survived. I did not ask. I did not want updates. There is a difference between wanting justice and wanting to stay tied to the source of your humiliation forever. I did not owe him my curiosity. What I owed myself was a line. So I drew one. No more secret rescue fantasies. No more money attached to silence. No more pretending a beautiful label can clean a dirty transaction. If I ever make it exactly where I meant to go, I want to arrive there as somebody who can stand the sound of her own name. People like clean lessons, but life usually hands you something rougher. Mine is simple enough anyway. Need can make a person negotiable in her own mind long before she looks negotiable to anybody else. That is the dangerous part, not the proposition itself. The small inner shift that starts making it sound survivable. It was survivable. That is not the same as saying it was worth surviving that way. If I could walk back into that restaurant, back into that little Italian place, back into that car where a man with a wedding ring asked me to think about my future, I would choose the harder road with both eyes open. I would leave school if I had to. Work nights, wait tables, cry in the shower, start over slower, do all of it. Because what nearly ruined me was not that he wanted to buy me. It was that for a while I agreed my future was something a man like that was allowed to price. What would you do in this situation? Be honest. Or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.